Thank you, Bob, and I think that was a great diagram to end on as well. So next up is Ian Green from SNOMED. Ian was a nurse originally, and has gone into information systems and information management around SNOMED for over the last 10 years. And I guess he'll take it from there. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, I'm a recovering nurse. So yeah, my name's Ian Green. I have a variety of roles working for SNOMED International. As you can see here, I'm customer relations lead for Europe. So there's a number of people here from European countries that I know very well. I also head up clinical engagement, and as a sideline, I kind of do genomics for SNOMED. So a bit about SNOMED International. So certainly from conversations I've had here, there's either some misunderstandings about SNOMED or just lack of knowledge about SNOMED. So SNOMED International owns the IP for SNOMED CT. It's owned and governed by its members. So our model, if you like, we have members who join SNOMED International, and as members of SNOMED International, you have free access within that country to SNOMED CT, whether that's from a government perspective, whether that's individual institutions, or whether that's on the commercial side. We are a non-for-profit organisation, and our raison d'etre, if you like, is setting global standards within health terminology, really just to push the safe and effective use in healthcare. We have a headquarters in London, but don't get too excited. The headquarters is literally a room in a postbox. As an organisation, we're completely virtual. We have a global workforce, so we have people in the Americas, within Europe, within Australia, and also within Singapore. The membership, so our fee structure, if you like, is based on countries paying in to be members. The amount they pay in is based on GDP. So the larger countries pay more than the smaller countries. We also have use of SNOMED outside member countries where we license either institutions or organisations to use SNOMED. And the vision here, you know, all organisations have vision. So our vision is that by 2020, not too long, SNOMED CT will be used globally for better health and supported by one language of health. So what is SNOMED? So first of all, SNOMED's an ontological resource. It has scientifically validated clinical content. So we have the challenge of providing terminology across the broad spectrum of clinical care. And unfortunately for us and anybody else in the terminology business, medical practice and clinical practice changes frequently. So part of our challenge is keeping up with changes in medical practice. SNOMED itself enables consistent representation of clinical content, but the focus is its use in electronic health records. We put a lot of effort into mapping to other international standards and collaborating with other international standards bodies, and I'll cover that in a couple of slides. It's used globally, so SNOMED itself is used in more than 50 countries now, globally. What is it? So I've just told you kind of how it works. If you go down to the nuts and bolts, so if you go under the bonnet, SNOMED itself, its release file, what you effectively get are three files. One contains the concepts, one contains descriptions, one contains relationships. The concepts obviously are very specific, have very specific meaning in the clinical domain. Descriptions cover a number of things, so it allows us to allocate synonyms, so different ways of representing the same thing. The descriptions also carry all the translations. So, for example, we're in Switzerland, so Switzerland are working on French and German translations of SNOMED. All those translations will be held in the descriptions file. The relationships really talk towards the ontology base of SNOMED. So the relationships are all those attributes and values that we allocate. So I'll use the common example that we use again and again when we do presentations like this. But if you're talking about an appendectomy, well, which is one of the other, so an appendectomy or appendicectomy, depending on where you come from. The way that's modelled in SNOMED has a method of excision. It also has a procedure side of appendix, and it's a fully defined concept. So if you're taking somebody's appendix out, you have to be doing an appendectomy. You can't be doing it any other way. So a bit about SNOMED. So I won't make a quip about size is everything. But SNOMED, so we release SNOMED twice a year. So the international release goes out in January and July. So these are the figures from this July release just gone. So we're up to getting close now to 500,000 concepts. Those 500,000 concepts have 1.5 million descriptions attached to them. As part of the authoring process, we allocate relationships. So those relationships, those attributes, are now close to 1 million. But part of the ontology base of SNOMED is that one of the things we look at doing with those stated relationships is putting them through computer classification. Once you do that, you generate getting on now close to 3 million inferred relationships. So SNOMED is big. Big is good, big can also be bad, depending on the way you implement it. So from our perspective, our focus is electronic health records, it's clinical care. Your focus is genomics. So why do we care about what you want? So there's a number of requirements from our perspective that we're looking to address on your behalf. So one is the storage of genetic information, structured data within EHRs. So whatever genomics research you're doing at some point needs to be fed back and needs to inform patient care. So structuring that data within EHRs is really what we're about. We do structured data. From our perspective, structured data needs to be standard-based, and the reason that statement is true is it supports interoperability, it supports information exchange. You can have the best curated data locally, but if it doesn't have some kind of standards basis behind it, you can't share it with anyone. Phenotypic information needs to be associated with relevant genetic information, but it needs to be stored as data both to support the retrieval and the use and reuse of data. So this isn't about just recording it, but also about how you use it locally and then how you reuse it, particularly from data analytics down the line. One of the things which we're looking at, which is particularly driving the clinical engagement side, so not necessarily just with genomics, but just talking to clinical groups, is this identification of clinical cohorts. So if you're treating a patient, you need to be able to quickly identify where that patient sits in a number of cohorts so you can treat them quickly with the correct treatment. But that also feeds into genomics research, the implementation of treatment algorithms, just the identification and being able to leverage hierarchies within SNOMED to enable you to do that. The patient data itself then should support the implementation of precision medicine algorithms. So at some point down the line, research becomes real. It becomes of use to clinicians who are treating patients at the point of care. And that requires some form of terminology to be in an electronic health record to allow you to do that. Oops. So where does SNOMED fit? Well, I started with this about how big SNOMED is. So one, we have a broad content coverage across all clinical domains. So we're not about just laboratory, we're not about medicine, we do surgery and a whole lot of other stuff, including all the allied health professions. We have active clinical engagement. One focus is to enhance content coverage, but also to look at other derivative products. So one of the things which SNOMED does is create a number of value sets, both in terms of just helping suppliers, but also helping with consistency of representation. SNOMED itself, so the product, has a full history mechanism. I haven't tried this, but I'm reliably informed. If you take the history mechanism within the release of SNOMED, it's possible to rebuild every release back to the first release of SNOMED CT. If you have some time on your hands, you might want to try that. I don't, and I haven't. We're also looking at development and addition of particularly genomic-focused content. So we have had a project now with INSERM, who develop Orphanet, for about coming up to 2 years now. We also collaborate with a number of standard bodies, HL7 being one of them, but we also collaborate with WHO. So we've worked in the past on ICD-10. We're moving forwards towards ICD-11. We also work with MEDRA, IHE, LOIC, and a whole lot of others. The ontology basis, from our perspective, is important because it supports data analysis. So, just being able to record as a clinician with a patient in front of you what is wrong with that patient, what you did to that patient, what you found from that patient, but then to be able to use that in longitudinal data analysis is important, both from the genomics perspective and just normal clinical research. I've already mentioned cohort identification, but also value set development all forms part of that, and the ontology basis enables us to do that. The subsumption, so by subsumption, because we computer classify the whole of SNOMED, we create hierarchies. It's possible then that everything within that hierarchy is logically linked to something above it. So we can leverage subsumption both in terms of identifying cohort patients, but also just to delve into the data within SNOMED. Just standards development in general, we work with a lot of other standards bodies to define and create terminology resource. So, when Bob mentioned this, the work around HL7, HL7 messages have content in it. It has terminology in it. So we work with other standards bodies really to define, if you're going to put SNOMED in, what kind of SNOMED content do you use? What limitations do you use? So from our perspective, the future plans, if you like. So one, we have a genomic strategy which really looks at working to align SNOMED with a lot of the global terminology resources and standards which are already out there. Orphanet I've already mentioned, so we've been adding now Orphanet content, so rare disease content, over about the last 18 months. The content, as well as going in as individual concepts, also include text definitions which have come from Orphanet, really with the idea of just helping day-to-day clinicians make sense of some of the terms. The terms from Orphanet, by definition, are rare. If you're looking at getting that information across to normal working clinicians, you need to help them. Part of that work also involves the development of a SNOMED to HPO map, which won't be developed by us, but will be developed by INSERM. We're also looking at developing a number of pilot sites, really both to prove the utility of SNOMED in the genomic space, but also as a learning exercise from our perspective of what SNOMED needs to include and the way SNOMED needs to develop in the future to best support you guys. And that's where it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian.